All right, welcome everyone. It's Sunday, December 4th, and today we're doing our Dharma Talk on preparation for the full moon, which is coming up on Wednesday, December 7th, and also the expression of Gene Key 5. Now, Gene Key 5 is part of a series of gene keys, including my gene key. So I love this time of year and these gene keys. It's the ring of light. And when I say my gene key, what am I referring to? The life work gene key. So if you have a birthday today or the next 5 days-ish, you will have the life work of this particular gene key 5. And I know one of our community members is going to have a baby, and most likely that baby will be born in the frequency of the life work, meaning that's your karma that you came in with. And you have these codes inside you that get to play out in your life. We have all of these codes, all of us. So what I'm talking about is a body of work from Richard Rudd called the Gene Keys, and the sun hits a particular code around every 5-ish days. And if you happen to have a birthday then that means that's your life work. That's like what you incarnated with. That's what your conscious sun is. So you're aware of this work. It's awesome to read your life work because it gives you a lot of information about your purpose. And of course, the profile goes deeper into your life purpose. What's your unconscious sun? But here we're going to talk about what you're aware of. All right. Thank you. Oh, is that your life work, Dina? That's so awesome. Yeah, so I actually was very close to a person whose birthday was in this Gene Key 5 zone. And so I have firsthand information on this Gene Key 5, which is really interesting. So I'm going to weave some of that in there. No, my birthday is not today. Not yet. No. My birthday is in a couple weeks. Gosh, yeah, it really is in a couple weeks. And it is Gene Key 11. So I will do a transmission, maybe not live because I'll be with my friends in Tulum, but I will do a transmission and post it so that you can still catch up with all the gene keys in this ring of light. So we've had Gene Key 9, Gene Key 5, and then we'll have the 26 and then the 11. And these are part of the ring of light. And what we mean by that, I'm sure there's so much depth to this that I'm going to miss it, but I'm just going to presence one point on it. And that is to say that inside of these codes, it's living wisdom, and the living wisdom is activated through light, through, like, if you can kind of imagine it in your own mind of something that gets shed light on, but it comes from inside of our cellular structure and it unlocks new frequencies. So we might be living at an old conditioned frequency. And then as we do our work, we unlock more light. That's kind of the mechanics, as I understand it, of the gene keys themselves. And in particular, this ring of light, I like to think of it as coming at a time when both northern and southern hemispheres are thinking about light, coming into the darkest day of the year or coming into the lightest day of the year. We are present to how light affects the way that we live. And in fact, science says that it deeply affects the way that we live. So every morning when I get up, I make a beeline to get outside in order to open my eyes to the blue light, because the blue light is what sets your circadian rhythm for your sleep at night. So think about as Homo sapiens sapiens came to be, we had a relationship with light. The way that the sun moves and influences the seasons, influences our food, and also the moon. And we're going into a full moon, meaning that the sun's shining its light on the moon, and we can see the fullness of that light, of the moon, because of that light. So the moon in traditional astrology represents the public. And that's why we say that there are, people go crazier on full moons. And it's just the energy is amplified. If you've ever walked into an ER room, which I did when my mother had a stroke, I walked in and it was a full moon. And I said to the nurse, "Do you know it's a full moon?" She's like, "Don't even tell me." Because they know, for some reason, they know that it gets crazier on a full moon. Things are amplified. So light amplifies. Light shows us something that we didn't see before. So as we're going into this, I'll just presence the full moon that we're going into right now. The full moon is in Gemini because it's the opposite of where the sun is in Sagittarius. And this full moon is, like all full moons, a release mechanism, a harvesting. So we really take stock at full moons. And I have a really awesome full moon, new moon calendar full of intention settings and release settings and keynotes that I'm going to release for 2023. I just got super inspired to do it. It's probably like 25 pages, and it does every new moon and full moon throughout the year. So I'll make sure that you guys can get a hold of that when we release it. But that's again my attempt of the way that the feminine can really step into a deeper level of leadership is by being connected to the rhythms and cycles of life. And that's really what Gene Key 5 wants to teach us. So this full moon that's coming up in Gemini is giving us an opportunity to take stock of where you're at. It's a really great thing to do right now as we approach the end of the year. We'll go into a Mercury retrograde after Christmas and through the beginning of January. So do not even think at all that, don't even do New Year's resolutions at all, because you will not have the information that you need that a Mercury retrograde is going to give you at the beginning of the year. I'm going to do a cool planning session, and that's exactly what that kind of time period is for. And then really the gene keys and human design say that we start the new year around like the 21, 22 of January, which is going to be about right in this cycle when we have Mercury retrograde. So we can all just breathe a sigh of relief and go into this state right now of really looking at what worked and what didn't work. How did you spend your time? So Gene Key 5 is going to be about time. And time is one of the most insidious shadows. Like time itself is not the shadow, but the way that we interact with time. In my experience of myself and contemplating this, I've come to think right now that it's one of the most insidious shadows we have. We are all so dictated and run by Chronos, time. Chronos is run by Saturn, right? Saturn is the lord of karma. What is karma? That is time, right? It's who you've been being and the consequence over time of who you've been being. So Gene Key 5 is saying that's a shadow, and you get to transcend that shadow. If to really transcend those shadow, you go into the gift of patience, and I'm going to reframe that a little bit, and then the city of timelessness. That's the anchoring into your timeless self. And that is what we call enlightenment. Think of the word light in enlightenment, the full light, the full opening of the understanding of the nature of reality. You're no longer obscured. You are open to the light. The light is the truth of what is. Now, the light is blinding as fuck. So imagine you've got like that, your lamp at your desk, put that in your eyeballs. That's enlightenment. You are fully awake. And really, our ego selves, I mean, I don't want to be fully awake. No way. Like that is brutal. Seeing that light is brutal. It's beautiful, brilliant, and I think brutal, because everything dies in the light of that light. The you who you think you are dies in that light. And it is the source of oneness. It is the source of the all, the Atman, the true self. So wouldn't it be amazing if we can live connected to that while we are here on earth, in Chronos, in time, doing our thing? And really, what's our thing? To me, to live your genius, to be a creator. What else is there? I would like to know if you have anything else, because as far as I've gotten, being a creator is what I'm here for. So let's get into Gene Key 5 a little bit. It had me go down a couple rabbit holes, and I didn't get to go as far down as I wanted to, because my own understanding is limited. Time is a really complex subject. So when I was doing this PDF for all of you on this calendar for the full and the new moons, I started to, like, there's 13 moons in a year. So I started to dig into the calendar. How did the calendar get set the way that it is? And it turns out, and that's because a year is a little bit longer. It's like 365 days plus a quarter. And then that's if you track the seasons of life, light, to get you stable. So they came up with, like, Julius Caesar came up with this calendar that we basically live by today. And there's other iterations of it. So I just realized at the end of the day how incredibly complicated mapping and charting time has been. And we've taken that complication to the next level. And that it has activated at the shadow level. The shadow is impatience in the wording of the gene keys, but it's really a disconnection with the flow of life, with the pulse of life. Because at the higher expressions of 5, you're freaking a time bender, right? I mean, and if you have Gene Key 5, I'm going to say, and I have Gene Key 5 as the gate. I have a gate. That's the only defined gate in my entire sacral. So if you're a generator in human design, you have that defined sacral. I am not a generator, so it's not defined. And I only have one gate, and that is Gene Key 5. And I relate to it deeply because it's a person who likes rhythm, likes patterns, likes routine, does really well with structure. And as you know, and I said this last week in the new digs I'm in right now, temporarily before Tulum, one of the things that really got thrown off was my rhythm. I keep my keys in the same place all the time. I mean, it really lowers the transaction costs. I never have to figure out where my keys are because they're always, I've trained myself, and I'm actually good at that. Like, it's part of how I roll. It's part of my structure. And that's what Gene Key 5 is. It's highly structured, it's pattern oriented, but inside of the pattern, there is this flow with life, with the pulse of life. So I feel like 5 is really the integration of masculine and feminine. It's the bedrock of all the gene keys. Because inside of it, in 5 is the pattern of life. It's not just the pattern of humans, it's the pattern of all of life. And so nature, as we see, nature has a beautiful way of taking care of herself, of flow, of structure, of patterns, of seasons. Everything in nature makes sense. Hence the whole field of biomimicry. If we could just mimic nature, then our practices will be more sustainable, because nature has figured out a way that waste equals food, that life is truly circular. And you can see in our minds, in minds that are not connected to the pulse, we then create things like landfills. We create waste that doesn't equal food, that actually burdens the ecosystem. It's like toxicity in your own body. It's like mercury poison in your body. It burdens the system to do the thing that it's meant to do. So one of the things that COVID showed people is where, if they look under the hood, and really we can't look too under the hood inside of our bodies, but it showed us where our weaknesses are. It goes right to the weakness and it shows you where your weaknesses are, whether it's emotional, like lungs and grief, or literal, like you have scars in your lungs, or whatever it is. You know, cultures that had lots of smokers, cultures that had lots of diabetes, lots of heart conditions, didn't do well with a virus on top of it. So when we add to by our lifestyle, and we cause toxicity, like the landfill, like the toxins inside of us, we're burdening the pulse of life. Because unobstructed, the pulse of life does life. It has the imperative inside it to propagate, to continue. And just like that, our minds work similarly. So time has become a big issue. And I've discovered that whether or not your root, okay, so some in human design, here's a little geeking out on human design, your root chakra is either defined or undefined. And in this case, it actually doesn't matter. I think undefined and defined, everybody struggles with time. Not enough of it, not spending it wisely. And that's part of this full moon. You get to go back and look at, how did you spend your time? As Mary Oliver said, this one precious life is a series of tiny actions. It's how you spend your day. It's the quality of your days broken down into a moment. It's the quality of this moment. And so Gene Key 5 is saying, when you connect back in with this river and this flow of life, you reorient yourself to the family of things, that there's a season for everything. And what I kind of call Gene Key 5 is playing the long game. If I had to put my own gift in it, the gift frequency for me would be the long game. Because it's a series of tiny actions that get us to where we want to go. Now, having had a lot of experience with the Gene Key 5er, I would say that that one of the things I observed was, first of all, a distortion with respect to time. Now, if you've ever done breath work, and it's particularly Kundalini breath work, right? And breath of fire for 3 minutes. Like 3 minutes is like a long time. You can actually do a whole breath work in 3 minutes. Some people actually have run a mile in 3 minutes. It's actually 3 minutes, 43 seconds, the world record holder of the mile. So in other words, you can get a lot of shit done in 3 minutes. But when you have a time distortion, you don't think you can get anything done in 3 minutes. So you might look at the clock and you're like, oh, it's 20 minutes. I don't have enough time. And that idea of not having enough time, even though there's 20 minutes, has gotten you off of the flow of life, because now you have a mental construct about what you can achieve inside of 20 minutes. And I lived with this person. I saw it happen over and over. And I'm like, no, you can run a fucking mile in 3 minutes and 43 seconds. I mean, we can't, but it can be done. And that's time bending. Somebody can do that. And we're going to get into like deeper levels of time bending in a moment. So what that really is underneath it is this deep fear of change. And that's what can happen to Gene Key 5. It can get massively waylaid in a deep fear of change, even though the consciousness of that person can be saying, no, I totally love change. Like, especially if you're a Sag, right? And if you have this in your life work, you're a Sag and you're going to say, I love change. And I'm going to say those words. And then my Taurus rising goes, no, you don't. So we're constantly trying to work it out. How much change can I handle while this fixed sign is like, no. And each person has their own equation around that. So I want you to check in now with your own relationship to time. And as we age, I'm going to tell you, like, that just gets way more amplified. As we get closer to the end of time in our physical form, it just gets more amplified. So it's an invitation now to re-understand, recontextualize, reimagine our relationship with time. So in this full moon, we can ask ourselves, how did we spend our time? You know, I just took this course this week on it's kind of a high level, high vibrational financial planning course. And the first part of it is a total reconciliation. And it just feels brutal, right? It's like, okay, how have I lived my life? What have I done up to now? And you get to ask that inquiry in a field of generosity toward yourself, knowing that that is a generous question for my future. Because if we hurl judgment on it, chances are we'll just avoid. And one of the things I've discovered in this Gene Key 5 inquiry, that procrastination and avoidance are the source of my anxiety. That's for me. So check in with yourself and ask yourself, what's the source of your anxiety? Now, if the source of your anxiety occurs like it's something outside you, well, I don't have enough money, or I don't have a partner, or I don't have this or that, I invite you to ask the question in such a way that it really empowers you. Who have you been being that you don't have those things? Because that right there is the power question that restores you to your power. Because now we know, like, if I know I've been procrastinating and I've been avoiding because I have a big story going on that, like, for example, I'm rolling out this website, as you all know, I'm doing this new thing and I have to write a lot. And it's kind of painful for me to write. I would like to make a video. I would not like to write, but I have to write. And then I create a story called There's Somebody Better to Write This Than Me. Have anyone ever made that story? There's somebody better out there to do this than me. And I've tested that theory. And the truth is, I've been honing my skills and I'm getting better and better. And I have a great person who polishes my stuff, but nobody can write for me. I have to do it myself. And so after fighting with myself for probably a year, I've surrendered and I now write my things and we have a flow. We now have a flow, and I cannot be the bottleneck in that flow. There are people counting on me to get to do what I've asked them to do, and I have to do the first thing. So that requires discipline. That requires me to notice when I'm procrastinating. And each of us has a different, let's say, methodology to justify your procrastination, which might mean getting hijacked into other people's problems. Anybody do that one? You get hijacked into other people's problems. I mean, as a projector, that is like super easy for me. So I'm totally guilty of that. And I notice it. So what Gene Key 5 is ultimately asking of us, and in fact, all the Gene Keys, it's, are you ready? Are you willing to decondition yourself? because inside of this gene key lies some of the most cosmic, amazing possibilities, as all gene keys really. But the price of admission is your conditioning. So inside of this, what I hear a lot of, especially in the spiritual world, it's all in divine timing. I'm just going with the flow. And what I've noticed, especially living in a conscious community, is that that's a bullshit way of saying I'm procrastinating and avoiding. Now only you know that truth, because it may be that things are not coming together, and it may be that it's not the right time. Or it may be that you have a story going on that someone writes better than you and that they should do it and that you shouldn't be doing it, or some other story. And that's your job, is to get very clear on the stories you're telling yourself and to take action. What I've discovered inside of Gene Key 5 is that when the body is tired, that's the time to stop. So you're here to get stuff done, full stop. You're here to do things. Like, that's planet Earth. And nature does stuff. It grows trees, it grows fruit, it does stuff. And you're here to plan to do stuff. I hate to break it to you, but you're here to plan to do stuff. Like, think about it. We won't have crops. If you go to the store, what you're seeing in the store is a shitload of planning, right? If you go to the store, you're not just seeing, oh, I just foraged this thing, you want to buy that? No, you're seeing massive planning for food. You have to plant some seeds and let them grow into trees and fruit. So there's planning that gets to happen. It's not spiritual to plan. What Gene Key 5 is saying is that there's a time for everything. There's a season for everything. There's times that you're going to have to rest, and your body tells you. So that shows up for me in this way, where, like, say I'm doing a project and my mind gets into, I've got to get this done. I've got to get this done. I've got to get this done. But then I realize my body is tired. It's listening to my body, because I will bend time. I will get more done when I'm firing on all cylinders. So that, to me, is the rhythm and flow that Gene Key 5 brings to us. I'm going to look at the content, comments in a minute. Okay, so I don't want to leave you without this really cool part of Gene Key 5. So if you have Gene Key 5 somewhere in, or really any Gene Key, but I encourage you to watch over your holiday time, watch the movie Interstellar. I brought that up at Sovereign CEO because I had just watched it, and Interstellar deals with time bending. So I just printed out a little bit about what Interstellar, for those of you who don't know, it's an old film. Kevin Costner's in that film. And it's based on the story of the end of the Earth. And people are, astronauts are charged with figuring out where life, the humans that are on Earth, can go next, or how to save Earth and regenerate it. So I looked it up because I was fascinated with this notion of time. When Kevin Costner's character goes past the black hole, time slows down. And so he's on this planet that every moment he's on that planet is like 7 years on planet Earth. So everybody's aging and his aging has slowed down. And that's of deep concern to this main character, because he wants to go back and reunite with his family and to think about his family being old, which indeed happened when he shows up. So he shows up as the same look as when he left, and he greets his daughter who's on her deathbed, because she's old. And that didn't really give away the story. There's so much to the story, but the notion that the physics of Interstellar was based on the ideas of a theoretical physicist named Kip Thorne. And I looked him up. He's actually a Gemini. So woohoo, like the full moon in Gemini. He's probably in his early 80s, and he was a friend of Stephen Hawking and Carl Sagan. He also won the Nobel Prize for Physics. And Christopher Nolan, who I think is a freaking genius, who created Interstellar, hired him to help with the physics around the black hole and time travel. But I think it's an incredibly inspiring film for several reasons. One is that it talks about the fifth dimension. And a lot of us are talking about the fifth dimension and how the fifth dimension consciousness came through in 3 dimensions. So how those in the fifth dimension were able to communicate with those in the third dimension. And it also sets our sights on an interesting notion around time, that the way that we have time, and here we're going into the city of timelessness, the way that we have time here in the 3D has gone from waste equals food and this beautiful rhythm of life to living up in our heads and massive anxiety around not having enough time, not trusting the rhythm of the life force, of the pulse of life, and feeling disconnected from it, feeling separate. I put that quote inside the email, that the hardest thing to do is to actually be separate. Really get that. When I read that, I was like, it's so true. We work so hard to be separate because our bodies, our nature is the sacred pulse of life. So I always talk about this bilocation. Can you bilocate? Can you be in 3D, planning, getting stuff done, planting seeds, tending to them, reaping the harvest? And imagine that metaphor for the projects that you have in your life, while at the same time being that timeless self, bilocating. You're in 2 places, you're doing the thing, you're in the pulse of life. And there's a remembrance that you are at your soul, the Atman. The true self is the whole, the oneness of it all. And that is the city, enlightenment. And so Interstellar just shows us there are so many ways to play, and that time is a construct. It's part of the structure of this thing, of where we live. But this structure isn't objectively real. It's not out there. One of the things he said is the notion that while we observe the universe in 3 dimensions, this is from Kip Thorne, there could be at least 5 dimensions. In certain theories, it's posited that certain forces, in this case, gravity, bleed through dimensions, meaning that based on Newton's law, we can have a finite calculation producing infinite implications. So just thinking of that, I got this from this website where they try to explain the movie. Like, how you're done watching the movie and you're like, what just happened? That's kind of Interstellar. So it explains the physics and the intention and the storyline behind it. So I really love that this movie shows us an example of how time bends and plays and reshapes itself. And that is actually, because to think about it, yes, we live in 3D and we're subject to the laws, the natural laws, and that's Gene Key 5. This is the pattern here. But we ourselves are this timeless being inhabiting this pattern. Does that not give you an open doorway to call in some new ways of being that are connected to the timeless self? That's something you get to play with. That's something humanity has not had the luxury to play with until now. We have been so concerned about our well-being, from being eaten by, saber-toothed tigers, to natural disasters, to feeding ourselves, to staying warm in winter. And now our basic needs are met for most people. And so we have this luxury to start open up dimensions inside of our own being that our other mammals, our animal friends, maybe don't have. I don't know. I mean, I'm not in their minds, but it seems like they get to live just the pulse of this rhythm, unless it's interrupted by us. But we get to live something a little different. It's the pulse, and it's like the two axes, right? It's vertical, horizontal, and vertical at the same time. And that's the gift of the Gene Keys. It really orients us to our conditioning that has us fail to remember the who and what we really are. All right. We are timeless beings inhabiting a pattern. Yeah, Vanessa, that's it. That's it. Whoa. I love that. I'm going to go check out some others. Tanja's here, Macedonia. Yeah, no one can do that better than you. Yeah, expressing our vision. Isn't that true? When we're the vision holders, that's our responsibility. Learning to create is what I'm here for. Yes, Michelle. Hi, Michelle. Oh, good morning, Robin and Dina and Barilla, Vanessa, Myrna. So happy to see you, sisters. Anybody else want to chime in? Oh, did I say that? It sounded better when you said that. When you reflected it back to me, Vanessa, it just sounded better. It sounded like, yes, that's exactly how it is. Isn't that an amazing privilege? So friends, that's how we get to live. Take the time over this full moon, as we go into the full moon, we're not there yet. Create yourself a little ritual of gently and compassionately beginning the review of your life, and start with time, since we're in the frequency of time. Start with how you're spending your time. This Gene Key 5 rules habits. It rules daily habits. Your daily habits ultimately make up a life. So how are you expanding your mind? How are you opening your heart? How are you living your truth? How are you listening to your body? Those are some prompts for you for this beautiful full moon. And then as we go into post-holiday, like post-Christmas, early New Year's, we'll gather and we'll do some intentional planning, but not like goal setting. I want to bring you through a process that calls forth a deeper sense of your values and your beingness. And that is the fertile ground to make a plan. So thank you for being here. It's been beautiful to be connecting with you. Thanks for yes, you must, Myrna, seriously. Myrna's our space woman here. You must definitely watch Interstellar several times. And so let's get together next week. I will see you here, same time. We don't have the Razor's Edge happening in December. We'll pick it back up in January with our community calls and everyone's entrance into the Evolving Sisters Network. We're still doing all of our planning here and getting things ready for the website to open the doors. It's really exciting. And I have to play the long game, because, you know, I want things done now. And that's Gene Key 5. That's the shadow of Gene Key 5. Like, I want it done now. Well, guess what? Even a mango takes time to grow on a tree, right? So whatever this is taking the time. The Evolving Sisters Network is taking the time to seed, to flower, to sprout, to flower. And I'm in it for the long game. Let that be a word for you, a phrase that you can use as you begin into the new year. What are you in the long game for? What is the thing that has you inspired? Okay, Christopher Nolan just came out with a new movie. Oh, okay, great. I was going to say, if you said Christopher Nolan, I just had dinner at my house. I was like, okay, invite me over, Katie. Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah, Corey, good to see you here. All right, blessings, sisters. Sending you lots of love. I'll see you here next week, same time, same channel. Mwah.